An army of 17,000 Argentinians and Brazilians advances decisively against a Paraguayan fortification defended by 5,000 soldiers. Today we will see one of the worst generals in history whose arrogance cost the lives of more than half of his troops in what would be known as the Curupayti disaster. It's the year 1864. At the same time that the Civil War was being fought in the United States, a conflict that would cost more than 500,000 lives, another equally bloody war was taking place in South America, which would take the lives of some 500,000 people. It was the War of the Triple Alliance, where Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay would carry out a campaign of extermination against Paraguay, killing more than 70% of the population. There are many reasons that led to this war. It would take us too long to cover the origin of the conflict, but we can synthesize it in that Paraguay had a policy of self-sufficiency, and there were large foreign interests that wanted to force its economic opening to the world. Paraguay was one of the few countries in the continent where the racial mixture between the European and the natives had been successful. The country adopted the Guarani as the official language, in contrast to Chile, Argentina, and Brazil, where the indigenous people were not even recognized as human beings and would be almost exterminated. Be that as it may, the war begins with a civil conflict in Uruguay, whose government was allied with Paraguay, and after the intervention of Brazil and Argentina, it switched sides. Undoubtedly, the numerical superiority prevailed, but Paraguay managed to successfully defend itself and inflicted defeats on Uruguay, forcing it out of the fight. On September 3, 1866, after having obtained a victory in Curuzu, the invaders lost the opportunity to take the then undefended fort of Curupayti, which gave valuable time to the enemy to entrench themselves. In command of the Allied army was the Argentinian president Bartolomé Mitre. The attack was scheduled for the 17th, but was called off because of bad weather. The Paraguayans continued working day and night in the fortification, whose design was in charge of the British engineer George Thompson. By September 22nd, at 6 o'clock in the morning, the rain stopped, and at 10 o'clock a.m., the order was given to the Brazilian ships to begin a bombardment. The Paraguayan fleet put up very little resistance as they were outnumbered. In over 2 hours, the battleships fired about 5,000 cannonballs against the Paraguayan trenches. At noon, the bombardment having ended, Mitre ordered the advance of his troops to capture the fort, which according to him should be an easy task since he assumed that the enemy positions were completely destroyed. Due to the rains, the terrain had become a swamp full of lagoons, in some of which the water was waist deep. The soldiers had no choice but to march slowly. The troops advanced in 4 columns, the Brazilians on the left and the Argentinians on the right, among which were some Uruguayan soldiers. The attackers had about 17,000 men, and Paraguay had only 5,000, many of whom were teenagers as they had lost most of their professional army in previous battles. This would be the worst military day for the Triple Alliance, and especially for Argentina, since the Allied bombardment had missed their targets almost completely, leaving practically intact the defenses that had been constructed at Curupayti. The Paraguayans, for their part, had the enemy at a sufficient distance to shoot, but by order of the commander, General José Diaz, it was decided to wait until they were closer. Many of the Argentinian soldiers marching were high-ranking officers who were wearing their dress suits and the medals they had received in other battles. It is said that the Paraguayans were target shooting them, choosing to kill them first as they were in front of their men and stood out with their colorful uniforms. By the time the reality became evident, it was too late, and entire battalions were instantly massacred, both by cannonballs and sniper fire, who were sheltered behind the large trench that had been erected days before. Faced with such a reality, and without waiting for the order, many men began to retreat. A couple of officers, called Arredondo and Rivas, who had just returned from the assault, informed Mitre that the front was a massacre, and that it was impossible to take the enemy position. At this moment, the Argentinian general decided to send a reconnaissance mission using a balloon, but the information obtained was confusing, mainly because the dense vegetation did not allow a clear view of the enemy trenches. In spite of what his officers had told him, the Allied general ordered a new attack, which forced those who were retreating to charge again against the impregnable defenses. Again, blood began to flow on the ground, tinting the lagoons with red. The casualties numbered in the thousands. A group of men managed to get together and advance against the enemy trench, but only to be executed, since in front of the high wall a deep trench had been dug, which was now full of mud, so that those who fell were completely immobilized. After 4 hours of a senseless attack, at 4 p.m., General Mitre understood the seriousness of the situation and ordered a total retreat with what was left of his army. According to him, he had only lost 1,000 men, between dead and wounded. But these figures are disputed, with several sources claiming that in reality the casualties were more than half of the total force, more than 12,000, among them 8,000 Argentinians. The Paraguayans, meanwhile, suffered only 23 dead and 79 wounded. Was President Mitre then one of the worst generals in history? Yes. First, he sent his troops to attack without obtaining the necessary intelligence from the enemy fortification. Second, his officers informed him of the slaughter, and even so, he chose to send more men to the front. And third, he did not want to admit the casualties suffered, preferring to lie to cover his mistakes. This battle would come to be known as the Curupayti disaster, and after this defeat, Argentina did not intervene in the war again, leaving the burden entirely on Brazil. However, the cruelest and bloodiest battle would take place years later, in the so-called Children's Battle, where an army composed of 4,000 children, some of which were just 6 years old, would face 20,000 men. We will see that battle in the next chapter of this war, which would last for another 4 years, and in which 300,000 Paraguayans, 100,000 Brazilians, 40,000 Argentinians, and 10,000 Uruguayans would die. If you liked our episode on history's worst generals, let us know in the comments down below so we can make more videos like this. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you next time.